Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today I want to do a video on what are the play styles of the different armies of the Napoleonic Wars. This is something that I've seen quite a lot recently, and to be honest, I'm not really surprised. I think it's a really useful, good question for people to ask. What do if I'd like to play this style of army, which one should I collect? This is going to be a general overview of a new series. I'm going to release the first part of that as we're in the middle of Russia month. It's going to be how to play the Russians. And basically this video is just going to be a very quick introduction that I can hopefully link to, or hopefully even more better would be if other people linked this video if they see this question in future. But yeah, so the idea here is I'm not necessarily going to go into a deep delve into what makes these armies the things that I say. You may disagree with me. If you do, please leave some notes in the comments. I am going to be doing a deeper critique of them individually. As I say, I've already done the Russian one. I'm going to be putting that one up today. But the idea is, it's just a quick one-stop shop for people to get a very rough idea, and they can then go off and investigate deeper for themselves. So why does this question come about? Well, as I've said in the videos on how to collect certain armies, I think that the vast majority of people that get into historicals and black powder in particular usually come from other games, and I think the vast majority of those games are from the Games Workshop universe. Now, one of the really good things about 40k and fantasy is that they differentiate between the different factions with different play styles. So, for instance, if we take 40k as an example, the Tau, very good at shooting, not very good in close combat. The Imperial Guard, not very good at anything in particular, but there's gazillions of them, and they've got pretty solid tanks. The Orcs, very strong in close combat, not very good at shooting. The Necrons, a bit of everything, very survivable, etc., etc. The Eldar, they're not very good at being jacks of all trades, but they're very good at the specialism that they've got. So the idea of an army having a trope, or even units within that army having tropes, is something that I think a lot of people assume is part of wargaming in general. And to be honest, I think it probably is. Again, you can look at other games, things like Malifaux. You've got the guilds, they've got a lot of firepower, they've got some good magic. You've got the Resurrectionists, they're very tough. Again, they've got quite good magic. I've not played Malifaux in a long time. I'm sort of digging through my brain here. The Arcanists, they've got all sort of like crazy things that their troops can do, but maybe them in themselves aren't so powerful. Actually, no, I think they are quite powerful. Anyway, like I say, it's been a long time since I played it. So the idea is, though, that the different factions have different strengths and weaknesses. In historicals, this is slightly less prevalent, and it's particularly less prevalent the more modern you get. I think we can look back on, say, an ancient Roman game and say, oh yeah, the Romans, they're few in number, but they're very highly trained. Their opponents, the Gauls, there's millions of them. They're not very well armoured, and they're not very well trained, but individually they've got quite a lot of skill. I think that's become sort of axiomatic. I think we can all just assume that that's the case. Whether that actually bears up the history or not, I don't really know. I'm not an expert on Roman warfare. But I think as we come further down the line towards moderns, it becomes more things like combat doctrine and equipment. So we can say, the Germans in World War II had a lot of machine guns, whereas the Russians use a lot of rockets, for argument's sake. That kind of thing. But the differences are a lot more nuanced in historical wargaming than they are in fantasy and science fiction. And that's because, in history there weren't 8-foot-tall, green, muscle-bound brutes. So, it makes sense that they would be a little bit more nuanced. It's worth pointing out, before we go any further, that certainly in Black Powder, all the armies can perform all the roles that they would have been required to in history. So, if I say this army is a defensive army, that does not mean that they can't attack. Don't think that I'm saying that. It just means that they're better defensively than they are aggressively. That could be that they are good at counter-attacking, or it could just be that they're super solid and they're not going to go anywhere. So I'm going to do this by army, I think, rather than by role. I think that's probably the best way of doing it. I will start off with the British Army. Now, the British, They did fight very defensively. They did attack occasionally, such as at Salamanca, and Vittoria. But most of the time, you think, British Army, you think the Thin Red Line, Waterloo, things like that. And that's reflected in the rules. The British, very, very much better in defence than they are in attack. They do this through excellent and a lot of firepower, supplemented by small but scattered units of artillery, and arguably the best cavalry in the game. So they can also have that counter-attack punch that some of the other armies don't necessarily have. Another really good defensive army are the Russians. Now, the Russians are very good defensively, not for the same reason as the British. In fact, quite the opposite. They're not very good at shooting at all, but they're very good in close combat, and they've got a lot of stamina, so it takes a lot to get them out of the way. Another army that I would recommend as a defensive army are the Spanish. Now, the Spanish aren't particularly good defensively. One of the problems that you might have is that due to their special rules, a battalion could flee having taken one hit. So that is a major, major problem. You don't want to be securing a vital area with just 1 or 2 battalions. You need to double up there. I say they're not very good aggressively because they don't have any of the special rules that give them bonuses when they attack. And also, if you're attacking and you take that one hit and then you disappear, well, suddenly your great right flanking attack or whatever has just disappeared into nothing. That said, they can use terrain a little bit better if they're attacking. They can maybe get round behind a village or a wood or something, and that will help them out to not take those shots. But overall, I would say that the Spanish are good as a defensive army. The Portuguese, I'll quickly move on to them. I know they're not a major faction, but they're the same as the British. They make a very good defensive faction. So we're going to look more towards Central Europe now. We've got Austria. Now, Austria, I think, is what I would call the balanced view. They're the Space Marines of Black Powder. They're very good at both aggression and defensiveness, and that's because they have large units. And their cavalry, they have gazillions of cavalry, so that helps as well. They're very difficult to stop when they're advancing in their battalion mass. If we get an earlier supplement, something like Austerlitz or the Danube campaign, that might change. They might be a little bit better defensively than they are aggressively. But as it stands at the moment, sort of 1809 to 1812, they're good in the attack because they can form those battalion masses, and they're good in defense as well. They've got that 4th point of stamina, the same as the Russians, but they get it because they are a large unit. They've also got 4 shots and 8 dice in close combat as well. So the Austrians, very good aggressively. They're difficult to stop, but they don't get the bonuses that the French necessarily do. They're very good defensively because they've got the numbers to cover the areas that they need to. Now, that can be a downside as well. Because the footprint of the unit is so massive, it does mean that units can find themselves a little isolated. Also, their strategy ratings, not great. Same with the Russians. That means they're better defensively, where the strategy rating's not quite so important. So we've looked at the armies that I think make the best defensive armies. We're now going to look at 2 armies that I think make very good aggressive armies. The first one are the Prussians. Now, the Prussians have got... they're a little bit strange. They've got 2 separate lists. They've got the Waterloo list, and they've also got the Clash of Eagles list. Now, I would say with them... I mean, they're both after the last reforms of the Prussian army in the Napoleonic Wars. They had another big reform in 1816. But they're a very good aggressive army. They have the column of attack, which is a very good special rule. And they also have the ability of sub-commanders as well, which mean that they get to do a little bit more aggressive action than another army would. Cavalry-wise, they're not the strongest, but they do have lancers, which are very good. And they've also got dragoons as well, which are quite nice. So it does mean, I mean, particularly when we get to Waterloo, they've got a lot more cavalry there. And it just means that they are able to, they can't really win a cavalry fight, but they can screen their infantry. Their infantry are very, very good. So it means that the high decisiveness factor of the generals means that you can be a lot more aggressive with them than you could with, for argument's sake, the Spanish or perhaps the Russians. Now, finally, we're going to get to the glaring omission from this video so far, the French. The French are, for me, the ultimate aggressive army in Black Powder. If you want an attacking army, if you like to play orcs in fantasy, or if you like the guild in Malifaux, then for me, the French is where it's at. They have huge strategy rating. You start off with 7 or 8. You put them in the column of attack, and due to the pas de charge special rule, you're looking at strategy rating 9 or 10. So your troops can be moving 24 inches, 36 inches in a turn. They've got masses of cavalry, not as much as the Austrians, but they've got quite a lot, and they've got a lot of heavy cavalry as well. Dragoons, cuirassiers, carabineers. They've also got lancers as well, which can help nullify the enemy's heavy cavalry. They've got a lot of decisive generals. They've got a lot of special characters if you want to use those. And they've also got a lot of elite infantry units as well, and elite cavalry in the form of the Imperial Guard. Now, I often view the Imperial Guard as a separate army from the French, because they do have a separate army list in the books, and they are very much self-contained. So I would also have the Imperial Guard as a very aggressive army. Their special rules, their column of attack, it affects them when they are in a column of attack. It's not a column of defense, so they need to push forward, they need to keep going. They should outnumber the enemy quite a lot, maybe not if it's Russians, but when I say outnumber, not necessarily in figure count, but in number of battalions. This is a great thing. You're up against the Austrians, for argument's sake. The width of that Austrian line regiment means that they'll be facing 3 or 4 French battalions. Now, only one of them can charge to contact, of course, but you can pick which one's going to do that charge after, you look at the one that's less impacted by the fire. They're still going to have to take the closing fire, but you get what I'm saying. So, overall, a super quick overview of the armies of Black Powder. Quick summary, we've got defensive are the British, the Spanish, the Russians, and the Portuguese. KGL as well, they're part of the British. And mixed, we've got Austria. She's very good at attack and defense. And then the aggressive armies, we've got Prussia and we've got France. I've missed out all the minor armies, I know, but this is just a very quick overview. I'm going to leave it there. Please like the video if you enjoyed this quick rundown. As I say, I'm going to go into more detail in the individual breakdowns. Please, if you disagree with me in the comments, leave them. I do read all the comments, and I'd be interested to see what people think. I'll certainly look into them when I get to those deep dive videos. Thank you very much. Goodbye.